Okay, hi everyone. How are you enjoying the CityLit Festival?
Woo!
Nice. So, welcome to the 23rd CityLit Festival held in partnership with the Maryland Center for History and Culture. My name is Sherry Woods, and I'm a board member of the CityLit Project. We are not your ordinary literary nonprofit, and these are not ordinary times. Today, we celebrate the idea of bearing witness, declaring without question or thought that literature is a revolutionary act. The very act of writing, reading, listening, telling our stories, archiving them, and sharing them with the young, and sitting with our elders is a way we honor history and our personal experience. We hope you take full advantage of the day with a robust schedule of ways to grow as a writer and expand your curiosity as a reader. Please be sure to read your program cover to cover to learn about the 22 sessions we offer, and please visit our literary marketplace vendors, whom you'll see in various places throughout the main level. Book signings will take place outside the festival bookstore, which is near the entrance and down the steps. And so after the session, I will escort Michaela and Bry to the book signing section. Our festival is free. We hope you support presenting authors by purchasing their books and following them and us on social media. Allow me a moment to acknowledge any CityLit staff, board members, leadership council, gladiators, and volunteers who may be present. If anyone's here, please lift your hand.
Thank you.
These are the creatives who work diligently behind the scenes. Today, again, we want to thank the Maryland Center for History and Culture as our new festival partner, and Fulton Bank, who has a table at the back of the room, as this year's corporate sponsor. Thank you, Fulton Bank. We are also forever thankful for each of the funders and partners whose names are listed in the front of our program, some of whom have long known and championed our work throughout some lean years. We are deeply grateful. Before we begin today's program, Tenderheaded, Black Identity in the World of Glamour, are here in our history. Please mark your calendars for our upcoming events. On Tuesday, June 9th, in partnership with Bry Reed's bookstore, we present a master class with Courtney Mom, author of Before and After the Book Deal, called A Premise Isn't a Plot, on how she transforms a good idea for a novel into a manuscript. On October 22nd to 25th, our annual Write Like a Mother retreat returns to Baltimore with well-read Black girls Gloria Edom and Afro-minimalist Christine Platt. On Saturday and Sunday, September 12th and 13th, the Baltimore Book Festival returns to the Waverly neighborhood, and we'll have a prominent stage on the Saturday of that weekend. But today, I have the honor of introducing the moderator of Tenderheaded, Black Identity in the World of Glamour, our Here in Our History. Bry Reed, she's waving, is a Baltimore-born and bred artist passionate about cultivating her local artistic community. She's a Ruby's Artist Grant awardee, a board member for Writers in Baltimore Schools, and a fellowship advisor with New Generation Scholars Youth Archival Fellowship. Her work has appeared in the Baltimore Beat, and the Washington Post, and she co-edited the essay collection, Surviving the Future, Abolitionist Queer Strategies with Raven Hudson and Shuli Branson for PM Press. Please welcome Bry Reed.
Miss Michaela Angela Davis is a writer, creative director, producer, and image activist focused on the intersections of gender, race, fashion, culture, beauty, and of the utmost importance, identity. She was the co-writer of Mariah Carey's memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, which was an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. Can we get some snaps for the New York Times bestseller? And it was an instant New York Times bestseller, might we add. She was the fashion, beauty, and culture editor at Essence magazine, the founding fashion director at Vibe magazine, and a creator of the docu-series The Hair Tales. I hope y'all all, if you have not already watched it, please cue that up for yourselves when you get home. And something that is not directly mentioned here, but is very dear to me as someone who finished your book, is the role you had at Honey Magazine. For folks who aren't familiar, Honey was everything. It was our 17, our Team Vogue, and when Honey left the sphere of editorial, we had to go to Team Vogue. We had to go to 17 to see ourselves, and so there's no other pillar and monument. I want to say thank you as a Black beauty girl, as a Black fashion girl, as a Black writer girl. Thank you so much for the path you've laid before me and my peers, because no one did it like y'all, and it is very massively missed. And we'll talk about it because you've given up the tradition of thinking about events and cultural moments that could be covers, but I haven't. I have a list, and I hope we can talk about them. So as we get started, I want to invite us all to listen to a passage from the memoir that we've selected. And when we were talking before this and yesterday about the passage, there was a couple that came to mind, but immediately when you emailed me, I said, can you read about the editorial meetings at Essence in the way y'all put it on? And so I'm so excited for y'all to hear.
Well, thank you, Bry. And thank you all for coming. Some of you all know that this is my first public appearance since I've had a bilateral lung transplant. And it's a miracle. It's a miracle and an honor to be here, that I'm almost home. I'm from DC. I'm from the DMV. And I used to party a little bit in Baltimore. Janetta, do you remember the name of that club? It was kind of like the Clubhouse, but in Baltimore. It was in the Cut too. I can't remember. I keep trying to remember. Camille wrote the piece that was in Be More Arts, which is great. She was like, "What's the name of that club?" And I'm like, "I don't know the name of that club." And I thought maybe, because we came up here a couple times.
Come on, big fun in Baltimore.
It was. And actually, Bry chose this passage, which was perfect for what we needed. So this is an honor. I got family in the house. I got Sumter family. Somebody doesn't look that happy. Hi. That's my Sumter family right there. Justin, Tiffany, and the kids. And you've read the book. So that's Janetta from Duke Ellington. She has a very important scene in the book. Okay, so. At the weekly all-staff editorial meetings, all the editors seemed to make an extra effort to dress up for Susan. We dressed for her, for each other. At one of my first, I wore a pair of Trip NYC red tartan plaid bondage pants with black zippers from Trash and Vaudeville, a downtown fashion bedrock source for punk-inspired and alternative musicians in the heart of the East Village on St. Mark's Place, paired with a black-ribbed Adrian Vittadini sweater and red patent leather 6-inch red bottoms, so Kate Louboutin silhouettes. Hair buzzed in a fresh Caesar, thick black mascara stacked on my eyelashes, and number 99 Pirate Chanel Rouge on my lips. I walked in Susan's office, all 6 feet of me, and folded quickly into a lotus position on the floor. I saw the eyes. I heard a few roll. Black people don't really wear plaid, came from a very significant voice, sitting in a proper chair. A consensus of affirming head nods bobbed around the room. Real Black girls don't wear plaid, is what I heard. Real Black girls don't wear plaid. I wanted to stand back up and tell them one of the most iconic moments in fashion runway history was Naomi Campbell falling and laughing in Vivienne Westwood's show wearing a fucking tartan skirt. Excuse me, y'all. Sorry. I didn't, though. I sat in the assurance that I had deeper fashion references. I was at the fashion shows and clubs, watching the music videos, paying close attention to what the girls were conveying with their clothes. I didn't get my fashion cues from church pews or boardrooms. I understood the Essence editors' resistance. They felt betrayed. I get it. I also get the moment when forever revolutionaries become the resistance to the current revolution. I'm gonna read that one again. I also get that moment when former revolutionaries become the resistance to the current revolution. I believed I was caught up in that moment. Essence had been the revolution. Susan, Marsha Ann, Mickey Taylor, all media pioneers in the Black is Beautiful era. But alas, we had entered the fear of a Black planet time. Hip hop had all the elements to engage in a valuable discourse and create defining imagery in the tradition of the Black Power movement and the women's movement. Yet I couldn't even get a mention centering 3 women superstars at the only mainstream magazine for Black women. For some context, I wanted Salt and Pepper to be a cover and it got shot down. It was a time. I tipped back to my desk. Bondage pants and silhouettes make you, sorry. I tipped back to my desk. Bondage pants and stilettos make you tip. Still processing whether the comment and consensus was that I was not really Black. Were my plaid pants a red flag confirming the receptionist's assessment of me? FYI, the assessment told me I was a waste of yellow. We'll get to that later. That I was a waste? Or was this just another case of the jellies, being misunderstood because I was too early on some fly shit? Michaela, hi, George Pitts here. You want to do something really fun?
Can we get a round of applause for the words and the ideas?
Thank you, as I stumbled through that as if my tongue was on stilettos. Okay.
And we tip, tip, tip across hardwood floors. And I love that passage because I think it shows the contrast of where you were, even though you were on staff, and that tension that exists and that tension that you go through personally and professionally throughout the text, I think is very emblematic on that page of you're doing it in plaid. I wore plaid in your honor because Black girls do wear plaid. No red lip, but red sunnies, of course. Because I think the iconography of that, you get this rich, how many people could see her walking into that office, hear the tactileness of those heels hitting the floor, and also hear the chill of those stairs and that eye roll. And I think the images are so vivid and so beautiful, especially for a text that is memoirific in that it tells your life and your family stories, but it also is telling this internal epic about what it means to rise through the ranks of editorial in Black publishing. And a comparison I made is if folks have read Dr. Dana Williams' Tony at Random, this, I would argue, is the Black editorial fashion version of that literary history, right? And so if you're looking for companion text to that, I would put Tenderheaded right beside it.
I'll take that.
And to talk about earlier moments in the book, you lead into this text by talking about what it was like growing up across the Eastern Seaboard. We get a little bit of Jersey, a little bit of DC, and all of those histories. And something else that I think connects you to Toni Morrison is that for folks who have read The Bluest Eye, if you remember...
She fitting to make me lay out up here. Keep comparing me to Morrison. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think what is Morrisonian about literature is Morrison painted the everyday, right? Like people reference her as the pastoral writings of Black life, and I think your memoir shows how true that is because for folks who have read The Bluest Eye, the conflict that happens at the ice cream shop with Maureen, right? And whether or not she'll pay for Pickler's ice cream. And then I like that scene because it references all the ways that desirability is mapped onto Black childhood, right? These girls are walking home from school and they're aware, right? They talk about how boys treat one versus the other, how adults treat one versus the other. And I think the beginning of your memoir also gets at that. If you could speak a little bit about the moment earlier in the text where you talk about your fierce sister protecting you from getting jumped because of the idea that other people were mapping onto you about desirability and hierarchy.
Okay, so I think what that passage does, and also what your question asked me to get to, is how what was mapped onto me was who is really black, and what is blackness, and who is legibly black, and who is a real black girl. And for instance, in the passage, what I was wearing was really emblematic of what was happening at the time. There was a real convergence of a hardcore scene or punk. I'm from DC, so we didn't call it punk, we called it hardcore. But a punk aesthetic and a hip hop aesthetic, and this sort of high glamour. So, you know, you got on lubies and bondage pants and, you know, and hoop earrings. And it's at that moment when you are charged with that real black girls don't wear plaid, and that an editor felt the need to announce that in a room of other black girls who, because of her stature and station, had to agree. Now, if you go backwards to playground, the same kind of dynamics can happen on a playground, right? The girl with the most power, the most popular, the bully, can say something to a black girl about her hair, about her skin, about her outfit, and it becomes pressure for the others to agree. And then that settles that, right? So you're settled as the odd girl or the geek girl. And in our generation, we were fighting for this one, meaning it's not odd now to be a black girl in tech, or it's not odd to be a goth black. Well, it depends on what your neighborhood is, but it's more acceptable. You see it on TV, right? And back then, we were just so. Let me get back to the childhood question about what it meant to be in that neighborhood and what it meant to be mapped on in terms of desirability. And it wasn't quite desirability yet. It was really acceptability I lived in an all-black neighborhood, and aside from my hair, I was not legibly black to most other people. And I came up with that term in the process of writing this book, because what I realized is that the term light-skinned was insufficient. Light-skinned, medium, dark. For a spectrum, for people who have a spectrum that is as dynamic as the cosmos. And so as I was trying to, and I use a lot of description of people's skin tone in the book, mostly about food, you know, but because I wanted to be really intentional about what our skin actually tells you about where we're from, who we're from, what we eat, what we feel, who loved us, who got married, who didn't, right? So this notion of, are you really black? And the first day I went to school, I had long, dirty blonde, fat braids. And it set, like those tartan bondage pants, it set off some girls in my class. I was in the second grade. And I was walking home from school with my best friend, Debbie Chandler, and I was surrounded by a bunch of girls, with one of them with a pair of scissors, yeah, ready. And we had a tussle, and we didn't really tussle. There was a scene, and I found a moment to break, and I broke. And I get home, and I'm safe. I didn't get jumped. My hair didn't get cut. The incident happened, and it's actually written. The full story is that I could have made a choice, and I made a real conscious choice. And you picked this up about how childhood gets really interrupted sometimes for black girls, where you face scissors and knives in the second grade that makes you have an adult alertness, and that snatches you out of childhood. And in that moment, I was like, I'm not gonna be scared of these girls. Those girls are supposed to be my friends. Like, I'm coming to school. I had just left an all-white neighborhood in New Jersey, and I'm like, I finally made it to Chocolate City, and they're not gonna literally cut me out. So I made a decision. I'm gonna go to school the next day. I'm gonna make friends. These are gonna be. I'm in the second grade. Like, I'm ready to go. But as this cover shows, I started doing this with my braids. I wrapped them up because they weren't gonna catch me in class with my.
You had to negotiate.
So I negotiated and I had a strategy. Just put the girls away. If my braids are making these girls upset, put them away. And so that became, like, my hair became a flashpoint of what made me part of Black girlhood and also part of what, it didn't set me out, but it triggered a kind of pain. And I would have, a few years ago, say jealousy, but underneath that, it's not jealousy. Underneath is pain and separation
Yeah, and I think
and misunderstanding.
what you showed through that inclusion, that you came from one neighborhood and you start the school year in another, and there's this visceral reaction, is that story, right? That Chocolate City story of what those second graders were up to, and older girls were there as you read it. Their story was already in media res, right? And so I'm also, in that passage, I think you give a lot of tactful space to understand that it wasn't this pure flat narrative, oh, they're jealous of my blonde hair. You recognize that, oh, there's something, we're all negotiating something. Because you also emphasize the power dynamics, right? Because someone was forcing a younger girl
Yes.
to map violence onto you. It was like an instruction from an older child of, this is what you must do, get her.
Correct.
Yeah.
The editor, basically.
Yeah.
Because we were in the second grade, and the thing is, I also had a trauma in the all-white neighborhood when I wasn't read as Black, and I had a little white girlfriend who had an epic Barbie collection. That's why we were friends. I was shallow. She had all the Barbies and all the clothes for the Barbies, and I was a fashion girl at birth. And her mother didn't know that I was Black, so I could come to her house and play. And one day my brother picked me up from school, and he had come from football, and he had a big afro, and it was flat and had leaves in it and all kinds. And once she found out that that was my brother and that I was actually Black, I was not allowed in that girl's house anymore. And the thing that was so significant about, and what was so significant about that, and I write it in the book, is their house didn't have any books in it. And I was like, what kind of house doesn't have books in it? It wasn't their race, or, because I had not learned to make it black and white. That didn't really happen until I got a little older in DC. But we had a little library in my house. We had a dictionary that sat up on a little pedestal. And I'm like, they don't have a book, and I'm not allowed in her house? Like, I was like,
You said,
hold up. So I had come from that, and that was traumatic. And then I had come from that to DC, getting chased home. But those girls did become my friends. I then later became, because my sister went and cussed them, laid them out. There was no violence. There was no fighting, but she laid them out. And the next day I went to school and everything was cool. And I ended up being like popular, but I made a decision. You can't kick me out of Black girlhood. I don't care. I'll fight if we have to.
You'll stand on it.
I will 10 toes down.
Amazing. So I hope that gives you a picture of the family history and the childhood history in this book. If we may, I want to talk about the fashion and the identity and the culture of it all, because when I read this book, it was interesting reading it in the now, in the 2026, because I think for a lot of our discussion of Black identity in 21st century media, I'm playing back my own memory as I'm reading your text, and I'm like, I remember the magnitude of print magazines that I had as a child. I remember sitting in the dentist's office, or I would accompany my granny to her oncology appointments, and there's Jet and Ebony and Essence, right, amongst the Where's Waldo and the stuff that was considered, child age appropriate. And I think something that I really appreciate about the technical aspects that you talk about with editorial is you talk about going into a meeting, I think, with L'Oreal advertisers. And you have to make the case for Beyonce's marketability in the early 2000s. And so as a lead-in question, I want to ask you, how does it feel to know you were so spot on with the marketability of Beyonce Knowles in the early 2000s?
I feel like I need, you know how Hillary Clinton had that hat? She was right about everything. I feel like I need a T-shirt about, because I literally said, I literally said, one day Beyonce is going to rule the world. And I meant her as a metaphor for young urban women. So I was saying this is the market. But I literally said Beyonce is going to rule the world. And this is in 2002. So, yeah. I really appreciate your opening of acknowledging Honey, because it meant everything to, that was the heartbreak of my life. Breaking up with Honey was harder than any dude ever, because it was 750,000 of you that we were serving every month. And I remember, and I'm sure some of you all remember, going to either your home or your auntie's house, and the essence would be like splayed like a fan on the table with respect. It was the equivalent of, you know, in my parents' generation, when Julia was on television, or Diane Carroll, and everybody would get excited, like, you know, there's a black girl on TV. It was like that with a beautiful glossy magazine, like, look at us, we're here too. And
Coffee table display.
yes, like fanned out and kept with respect. And part of wanting to get that in the book was so that there's an archive, that there's a record that we were here, that Essence was here, that Honey was here, that Ebony was here, that while there was a parallel industry, while folks have been looking at Vogue and Vanity Fair and Rolling Stone, there was Vibe, there was Honey, there was The Source. We were there chronicling our own culture in the most modern and we had high, especially the first copies of Vibe, if you were lucky to have kept it and seen it. The editorial standard was high, you know, and we were doing what Rolling Stone had done for rock and roll. They had beautiful photography, top-notch writers, searing criticism, and great fashion. Well, our fashion was better than Rolling Stone, but I felt part of, for the first time, a black cultural force, unlike what jazz was able to do. We were able to, in our own tongue, record our own culture for ourselves, by our own writers, by our own critics. If you look at the great, you know, criticisms and books about jazz, they're almost entirely by white writers. I mean, they literally would have white models on the cover of early jazz records. Like, we weren't even able to, you know, Miles Davis fixed that, but it was so critical to make these publications something that you want to hold and keep, and that you felt proud to have.
Yes, and you talk about that, the outward, you talk about the visual. And if anyone, there are Honey covers on Flickr. If y'all remember Flickr, they have about a collection of 10 Honey covers. And so that's another thing to bookmark when you get home. If you can see these beautiful Missy Elliott covers, which I'll come back to that December edition in a moment. But I want to talk about, and just sort of,
I love that you have so many. She got like pink, some in pink, some in black, some in. I love that.
I'm a student.
A writer loves to see that. That means she went in on the book, and you didn't mark up your book.
No, this was all from listening to the audiobook. It felt like a lecture on Black media and culture.
Oh, wow.
Truly.
Okay.
And so something I want to talk about with that technical part is you talk at length about the vibe of it all, the honey of it all, and the essence about ad space and ad dollars, and how hard it was for Black magazines to not only get ad dollars, but also access to the fashion closets and pulling clothes from designers. And when I think about that, again, in this 21st century context of like, what would it be like now? I think about how Black editors are up against the influencer economy. Why would magazines get ad space when these fashion houses and beauty houses are engaging that influencer economy directly? And I'm also thinking about how innovative Black media and culture has to be in the 2026 to be distinct with culture and voice. And you talk about that struggle within the pages of Tenderheaded. What did it feel like for you emotionally to recall those moments when Chanel was like, we can maybe let you borrow a few pieces, and when these different designers were like, why would we dress Eve? People were refusing to dress Eve.
They didn't know who Eve was. She said, not Eve. But because if you remember when Eve was everything. But I was, so who said still is? Okay. But I was living in the dichotomy because I had also was doing quite, at least once a month, a couple times a month, some pages for Vanity Fair. And the way that I was treated when I was calling for Vanity Fair, for someone no one had ever heard of, there was a part called Vanities, which was new artists or new actors or new writers, just new talent. So that really means they were new talent. And I could call any showroom and be let in for Vanity Fair, but then when I would call for a cover of Eve, they're like, let me see what I can scrounge up for you. And this is before they started biting hip hop on their own runways. But because if you all remember, that was a big thing with Chanel where they had the beatboxes but there was a time that they wouldn't let us. I say us because my friend Janetta's also, well, she's a costume designer, but she was a stylist. She did Yellowstone, y'all. Yeah, you can clap for that.
Round of applause.
But and we were trained under Joanne too. Yeah. So oh, you know, she read the book. We were trained. But what's interesting and a bit heartbreaking, you'll find this like shocking too, Janetta. I was having tea with an editor-in-chief, a black editor-in-chief of a major publication recently. And they ran into the same problem for Doechii, for a cover. The hottest girl in the game. I'm like, wait a minute, 30 years later, the same thing for a cover.
They don't get it till they're too late, and then they bite.
You know what? That is the pattern. But it was heartbreaking because I hated getting that phone call, and you had to strategize because you didn't want to pop off and close the door forever. My strategy was I'm going to make the hottest cover they've seen, and they loved it. And somebody sent me some flowers. But it didn't make it easier for a mentee 30 years later. That's the rub, you know.
And
because we were talking about Law Roach.
Law Roach is
Remember, I don't know if y'all remember on social media when Law Roach went off about some of the houses. Was it Dior, House of Dior, some other that wouldn't lend him clothes for Zendaya, and he was like, okay, then I won't. We won't.
Anyone. Yeah.
And now Zendaya is ruling the world or whatever, you know? And so it goes all the way back to 2002 when I was saying this about Beyonce. Why don't they believe us? Like, how much proof do how many of these fights do we have to go through? And what became really clear to me is in the showroom, the people that were denying me, it was almost like the girl with no books. You work in a showroom. What is it doing for you to withhold from me? Like, that's not your stuff. That's Chanel's stuff. And I hated that I loved that stuff so much. Yes. I wanted it, you know, because that was my orientation. I love cute stuff. My eyes just, you know, and to punish or seemingly punish my position seemed just cruel, just like some secession cruelty that has no benefit to you. Like, you're a showroom, and often, and I know you know this too, Jenna, often those are debutantes, girls that don't need the money. So they can afford to work at Chanel for very little money and just be around nice stuff and celebrities. I don't know if anyone has watched the story about JFK and what's it called, Love Story? Have you watched? Yeah, and the way that they are showing the Calvin Klein showroom. She was a real working girl, which was rare, but they don't make that much money. They're just there to, Okay, sorry. She got me on a tangent.
And I think that's perfectly okay. Um, I wanna end off talking about some contemporary events and covers that I had dreamed of when I finished the book. But before we get to that, one of my other favorite moments is when you talk about the Missy Elliott December 2003 issue, and you talk about a story from Kenya Hunter, about the Liberian Civil War and its impact on women and how women struggled and fought and were conscripted into different sides of that war. What did it feel like understanding image and identity even then, not to just be purely visual, but to be about who's engaging these stories of the African diaspora, right? Because I think that's also what I want to emphasize about the importance of the Black press is it is not only an aesthetic importance, right, about who's wearing Chanel and can we get the Swamp Princess on the cover, right, in Dolce and Gabbana, but it's also about an economy of employing Black writers to write important stories that white publications will not have vested interest in the same way. Can you talk a bit about that experience? Because you say it took 3 rounds of edit or 3 issues to get that story to the perfect place that y'all got it to when it was published.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that issue up because that was we were calling it internally the genius issue, where it was a split cover of Missy Elliott and Beyonce. And it was December, January 2002. And our plan was to have an annual Black Girl Genius cover. And, you know, as I was telling you over lunch, those were 3 words we didn't hear a lot together, Black Girl Genius. And I felt Missy and Beyonce were emblematic of that. And Greg Tate wrote the cover story. Like they deserved our finest critic and journalist at the time. And one of the great heartbreaks of Honey was that our mission was to attract and train and mentor women of color writers, creative directors, photographers, hair and makeup artists, graphic designers, stylists, the industry, kind of like what Spike was doing when he was making films. He was a pipeline of getting Black people into the industry writ large, right? And so writers could have bylines. Like that was our bigger mission. And so I poached Kenya Hunt there was a magazine called Jane, and there was an article called, the title was, "Look, Mom, I'm a video hoe." And I was like, she went undercover on a video set. And I was like, whoever this girl is needs to be at Honey. And I was successful in that poaching. And she brought me this story about Black Diamond, who was a general in an army in Liberia. It was the story of Eclipsed on Broadway. I don't know if anyone had had the honor to see Lupita play that part on Broadway, but it was that story. And we used the psychology of having a Beyonce on the cover and a Black Diamond in the book was you're going to pick up a cover because that's someone popular and sexy or whatever. But once I get you, we want to give you something. That's what every magazine does that. There's data around people buy a magazine from a newsstand in a matter of 4 seconds. And it's basically 1 or 2 cover lines and the image, and that's it. And so we wanted to compete. And also, a lot of people just didn't, especially Black folks, don't know the game of publishing. They don't know why do our things just disappear? Why don't we make it? Why is that so whack? Like, why can't big girls wear these clothes? Because they don't make them in the showrooms. Because the advertisers don't support them. And so we have to make a decision. Okay, do we survive? Or we don't even know how books are made. We didn't know that being beholden to advertisers make you do something very specific. And for a publication and for a culture they didn't even plan on. They didn't want us to be there. They didn't expect us to stay there. So I wanted to, without it seeming like a lecture, when you say lecture, I took that as a compliment. But I don't want it to, the read to be a slog, but there's part of it that you have to explain. And what how hard it was to stay alive in publishing as a magazine that was for urban women of color. That's just Honey, but also Vibe. And so when we look back at why isn't there an ebony that we can hold and display on our table anymore, I hope that it kind of can help explain how hard. I mean, there are very few print magazines left, period. But for us, it was even harder. Even the best writers, the best black writers now you find at The Atlantic or at New Yorker. There's not an Ebony where James Baldwin was writing essays for Ebony. Andre Leon Talley was the fashion director. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote an essay for Ebony.
Right.
So I'm still in a bit of a heartbreak around it, to be honest. There is new media, which I find myself getting excited about in and out, especially on the image activist tip, because of TikTok, because of Instagram, people can create millions of images that my daughter was able to look at and build an identity from, or that your daughter can find 1,000. She doesn't have to like dig through magazines and paste them on the wall like we had to do to say like, look, you exist in this world. So that I find very exciting. There's a lot of expansion in identity and identity politics. I mean, one of the reasons why I created that moniker of being an image activist was to expand those narrow narratives around who is black, what is blackness, what does it look like, who gets to be included, how is it identified and celebrated.
Absolutely. Can someone give me a time check on where we are? I'm out here. 1:15? Thank you. So I want to get into some covers. I don't want this to feel like salt in the wound, but I do want to pick your brain if I can before we get to our Q&A in about 20, 30 minutes. So start also getting your questions together so that when
We can give more time to Q&A if you want to. And you can answer some too,
Yes,
if
yes,
you want.
of course.
Because I love when it gets to the conversation part. Okay.
Yes, but some covers, as you say, I was in my bag when I was listening, and when we came to the end of Tenderheaded, I was like, what would a Honey cover in the Angel Reese era have looked like? What would a post-Roe Honey story on the South and women in Mississippi getting reproductive justice look like? And I think I'm saying these things to you because I want you to know that Honey's legacy is so vast. I'm even seeing it in the gaps of the stories that we deserve, right? WNBA Glamour in 2020 Streetwear, Brittany Spencer and Tanner Adele, right? The young black country singers who were on Beyonce's Blackbird. What would that have looked like? The survivors of sexual violence and
I think you about to put a magazine together, girl. Doesn't that sound like a single? Like, don't put that on me. That's we have witness.
yes,
Yes.
And I think what I'm giving on my shoe is the way that your story and reading this book automatically put me in the place
I
of
love
like,
that.
this is what we could have been doing as we talk about alternative black sound, like a SZA cover.
Why don't you make a zine right now? They're cheap. They're easy to make.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I'm taking all of this in. Maybe there's a grant.
Because Mother's a writer now. I'm like, but maybe I'll write something for you. But
I'd love it.
it took years for me to not think about who's going to be on the cover, or that would have been a great. My daughter and I used to just have this thing called Honey Girl, where we would see someone if they had on great shoes or great hair or their hair, Honey Girl, and I just stopped doing what you just did, with a new television show, a new artist, a new athlete, a new and the political figures, like the young people that are young women, like Jasmine Crockett would have been on the cover. Like when she first hit the scene, some like these exciting that's what we didn't have in the 2000s were the exciting political figures that we have now. So I think you can get busy, don't you think? Okay.
I'll pick up the baton and treat it with.
I'll mentor you. I'll help you. I'm not kidding.
Up.
I don't lie in
Carla,
public.
I follow up. Thank y'all so much.
And I love zines. I'm obsessed with them.
The Black Zine Fair is also something exciting that I can, if you don't have all those details, I'll make sure to pass it along. Before we get to y'all, can we get a riotous round of applause for Miss Michaela Angela Davis?
He said riotous.
And is there someone who can run this mic from the stand to the audience for our Q&A? Thank y'all. I don't know who, anyone with a shirt on, I think, has the authority. Or, yes,
He's
the
not on a shirt.
Thank you, thank you.
We're so glad you wore a shirt today, Patrick. You know, one thing I think that is a little bit important is the color cast that we got on it a little bit, but I wrote this book almost exclusively in Sumter, South Carolina, and that is my ancestral home. That's where my grandmother, or my maternal grandmother, my maternal grandfather, their parents, and their parents lived. And particularly the first third of the book, I felt very assisted by my ancestors. And I felt that I needed to go home to have the courage to tell the truth in this book. So that's it. That's the only thing I think I wanted to add that you didn't ask me. No, she was great, wasn't it?
Thank you. And I share.
Thanks, Bree.
And I share in that South Carolina matrilineal heritage. My people from Dillon, right beside the train tracks over there. So when you talked about that moment, also it took me to visiting Dillon. I'll never forget. One of the most memorable trips was in 2009 because we were in the wake of Michael Jackson's passing. And we're in this car with my grandmother, and she won't stop playing Michael on the way down. And I'm just like, that road trip is ingrained. And so even that, I meet you in that, and being descended from great South Carolina women and peoples.
Yeah, we almost made it to the finals. Did you watch?
Yeah, Gamecocks down, okay? Raven Johnson, I'm calling it as the number 9 pick to the Washington
That
Mystics.
broke my heart. Were you upset? Yeah, okay. Okay.
And I think now we'll start. So anyone got any good, juicy questions for us up here? My sister right here in the fly green sweater.
I know, it's a great sweater.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for being here. This has been a wonderful festival. I came down from New York, and I've just been blown away at every talk. So,
Oh, wow, great.
I am a part of an informal Black writers collective in the city, and we are conceiving of possibly putting together a zine. And I'm wondering if you have any like evergreen advice from your days as a publisher or leading Honey, and we could possibly impart in our process or getting started.
Let's see. So I did a little zine not long ago as a premium little gift to folks who were getting the book. And I went back. There was an exhibit at Brooklyn Museum on zines. Did you see that? So, but there's a book that came out around it, and I remember, and I'm dating myself. There's a magazine called The Paper. Their first issue was a zine. So was The Source. And The Papers was a fold out. And I remember just going, this is so cool. And so I did my zine as a little fold out versus a staple. Because there was something about the ones that are kind of stapled together in general made me feel like an insert or it didn't feel like the underground zine of the 80s that I'm very influenced by, but you might be influenced by 90s or 2000s. My advice is remember the zine you loved and go in and figure out what were the elements that you loved about it and see what your take on that is. Because in the paper magazine where it folded out to have 16 panels, in the center was like a center fashion image. And I just thought, okay, I want to try to do something like that. And yeah, so that's my advice. Remember why you love zines and what makes them cool to you, and do your version of that. Does that help? Okay.
Before we get to the next question, I just want to shout out my friend and my nail tech Maya is in the crowd, and she was she's one of the first people I talked about this session at length with, because when I think of glamour, I think about all the Black women I trust to help me be beautiful. So if y'all see this set and y'all love it, a Black woman did it, and she's so
Yay.
phenomenal.
So you know the Lil Kim cover. I go into that. So we did. This is 2001. So if you're probably in elementary school, but if you remember, the nail culture isn't what it is now. She has these long camouflage nails, and the nail tech hand painted them on the set. I remember that, like, we're going in for Lil Kim. But that was so forward to have really long, squared off nails in 2001. So I think I'm gonna get that T-shirt. She was right about everything.
Hi, thank you for joining
Hi.
us today. This is more of a comment than a question, but looking at the cover of your book, your photo, I have a little cousin who looks just like you. Light skin, blue eyes, sandy blonde hair, and so I remember, doing her hair when she was younger. But hearing you today, I never thought about probably the issues that she faced growing up and dealing with the fact that people are probably looking at her and calling her white girl. I remember my mom said to her mother once, "What white picket fence did you jump over to have?"
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just hearing your story just made me think I want to reach out to her because I've never really thought about those struggles. To me, she's just my cousin, and of course she's Black. Look at her, but
Yeah.
I never thought about what she might have encountered growing up.
Can I read something to you? Okay. Hold on. So this is at the very front of the book. This is usually what I would read at a reading. It's called Terms of Engagement. I'm going to just read a little bit of it. Terms of engagement. Before we deal with each other, there are a few things you should understand. I never fought a Black girl. I mean, meet you after school behind the rec center fight. It's not because I was afraid to get my ass beat outside. I had enough unattended anger, grief, and fear to fuel into fury and make me a worthy opponent. It's because I was terrified I would win. Going to a primarily Black public school, living in a primarily Black neighborhood in a majority Black city, fighting was a Black public school rite of passage. Complicated word for me, passage. This rite ran the risk of me shutting out, not passing through into the sisterhood I so desperately desired. Throughout this book, when I say Black girl, I almost always mean physically legible, Black from a distance, as Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly coined, Black girl. A whole Black girl. By the time I hit the playground, the baby battlefields, I was painfully aware, and it was and is painful, of the social hierarchy that I had been thrust into, a scaffolding of physical preferences that holds me hostage by virtue of my lighter than light skin, not so short blonde hair, and hazel eyes, attributes I've been in mortal combat with. That stood as irrefutable evidence that I was part other, Black and. According to my young Black math, this makes me less than, but it rendered me and it was the equivalent to a minus. Took me away from my Black, didn't make me less than, but it rendered me a partial Black girl, equating to partial acceptance, belonging, partial love. Thank you. And what I've found is so many people, after reading this, looked into their own family. Everybody can look in their family, and there's somebody that's kind of look like me, or cousins super light-skinned with light hair. And I felt like this was the time. We've come through enough that we can talk about this now. Because for so long, particularly being trained at Essence Magazine, we were trained to center dark-skinned Black women because they were so marginalized. So we was like, who's in the smallest cut of the cut? We're gonna center them. And that was done. And even they had some problems with that, right? Because we are on a spectrum of color, but we're still connected as Black folks. And part of me wanting to get to the color caste system and what it does and what's underneath what a lot of people believe is privilege, it's not a privilege to feel separated from your cousin or your best friend. It's not a privilege to walk into a class of girls and somebody wanting to cut your hair on your first day of school, right? And then I also get into what those girls who believed they were privileged did too, like who they were. So, and there's no perfect, like, I don't tie it up in a bow, but I try to get at it and get to it, mostly for families, mostly for Black women, because I contend if we heal the community. And I think this is in Camille's piece. And when Black women heal the community, when the Black community is healed, the country is healed. So this is my political work, to get to the most efficient group of people I know, which are Black women, to organize and heal. And so shout out to Healing. Girl Trek is in the house. I don't know if any of you all are Girl Trekkers, but one of the co-founders of Girl Trek is here with us, Vanessa, whose whole life is committed to Black girl healing.
Thank y'all. Thank you, thank you, thank you.